Hi, I'm Natalie Bennett, former leader of the Green Party and about to be Green Party peer in the House of Lords.
Natalie, thank you for joining us. Why did you enter politics?
I'd been a journalist for 20 years, and I always knew at some point that I'd get out of politics because, particularly reporting international news, you see the same depressing stories again and again and again. And eventually that really gets you down, and you think, I want to change the news rather than report it. I'd always expected that I would have gone into perhaps United Nations, charities, NGOs, that sort of area. But I joined the Green Party on the 1st of January 2006, just with the intention of doing something about the state of the world, and the rest of it took over my life.
From the Commons to the House of Lords, you are entering as a peer, and yet you've reaffirmed your commitment to abolishing the House. How do you plan to achieve that?
Well, that will be one of my top priorities to working on as soon as possible, and I will be, talking to other campaigners on the same subject to work out the best way forward on that. But I can promise you that I'll be acting on that very soon after I've entered the House. I'll be doing something about it, and I'll be doing something about it every chance I get. I'll be there to abolish my own job as soon as possible.
But no plans?
Well, I think that you will see things within days of my going into the House of Lords.
Okay. Have you been able to make the most of your political career before entering it? Have you been able to achieve what you wanted to achieve?
Does any politician ever achieve all they want to achieve? I think the answer to that is inevitably no. I'm really proud of what the Green Party collectively has achieved over the past 10 years. We've grown from being 6,000 or 7,000 members to 50,000 members now. We peaked at more than 60,000 during 2015. When I was leader then, we got 1.1 million votes in the election, the general election, which was more votes than we've got in every previous general election added together. And just this year, with the European election, we got 2 million votes. So the Green Party is growing. We doubled our number of councillors this year in one election, which is unprecedented in modern times. And obviously now is very much the time in the climate emergency with the collapse of biodiversity and bioabundance. The issues that we've always been leading at are coming to the forefront. But what's really astonishing almost, it just keeps happening again and again. This morning, the Labour Party adopted the policy of abolishing Ofsted, which is a long-time Green Party policy, and someone got to me on Twitter and said, oh yeah, it's Lib Dem policy too. And there's so many policy areas, whether it's education, whether it's transport, so many areas that people are simply following where Green Party policy has led in terms of equality, in terms of things like the £10 an hour minimum wage. Basically, you can take our 2015 manifesto, and it's now a very broadly supported document across a very broad range of politics.
The Lib Dems have announced that they'll revoke Article 50. Labour have announced that they will have a confirmatory referendum. If we had a general election tomorrow, who would you encourage your constituents to vote for?
It's not a very hard question. Of course, I'm going to say vote Green. The Green Party says very loudly and clearly, unlike some other parties, that the best possible deal we can have, the best arrangement we can have with our neighbours and friends is to be membership of the European Union. That's what we're fighting for. But we think the way to achieve that is through a people's vote. Give the people the final say. Now that we've seen what is actually on the table, what is being offered as an alternative, people should have the final choice, having voted in 2016. So what we want is a people's vote. We want to stop Brexit. We'll be campaigning very, very hard in that to win Remain for the case. And then we should have a general election, because what we need to be is tough on the causes of Brexit. There are really good reasons why people voted for change in 2016. People are desperately suffering. Whole communities are suffering from poverty, from inequality, from a real lack of hope, a sense that they can build a real future for themselves. And one of the things that needs to be a big issue in that election is fixing our broken political system. In the last election, 68% of votes didn't count. We need to create a fair, functional political system, which is certainly not what we've got now. That should be a big part of that election. But also, we need to make rich individuals and multinational companies pay their taxes. We need to restore public services. We need to create a different kind of Britain that operates within the physical limits of this planet.
Would you enter into a coalition with Labour to have a people's vote?
We will certainly work with anyone who can deliver a people's vote, but we've always said that coalitions in our current political system it ties you to voting for things you don't believe in, which is not what we want to do. We've always said, looking towards what's known as a confidence and supply agreement. So, we would do everything we possibly can to ensure we don't have another Tory government. That's bottom line number one. But what we're saying is not talking about, Lib Dem type arrangements of 2010 when people go into coalitions and in return for ministerial cars, vote for things that they explicitly said they wouldn't, like, for example, tuition fees. We, for example, are utterly opposed to nuclear weapons. We will oppose that. But we will also ensure that we don't have a Tory government do everything we possibly can to see that doesn't happen.
Climate change and the environment, obviously a central issue of the Green Party. How would Brexit affect the environment?
Brexit has the potential to be hugely damaging. We have a situation where Greens have long been critics of the common agricultural policy of the European Union. But lots of the things we've been most critical of, like the huge payments to big landowners, those have been the results of decisions made in the UK. Now, if we do Brexit, we're going to both lose that support for our farmers, which also includes small farmers, but we're also going to lose a huge amount of environmental regulation, protection for our wildlife, protection for special sites of special importance. We're going to have the risk of the import of horrendous American products. Chlorinated chicken is kind of a bit of a shorthand now, but you're looking at hormone-laced beef, you're looking at use of large numbers of pesticides that are already banned in the European Union. And our farmers will really struggle to compete against those goods. So there's a real risk there. And what you've also got, the world is, at the moment, pretty well lined up. When we think about climate change, the climate emergency in particular, do we really want to be aligned with Donald Trump? The world, has a number of big blocks in it. European Union, US, China, Russia. On environmental issues and on many other issues, I know where I want the UK to be lined up with, and it's certainly not with Donald Trump.
Is descaling industry and output necessary to combat climate change?
We have been chasing for years growth in GDP, gross domestic product. We've essentially been chasing, in simple terms, more and more stuff. If you take, for example, fashion, the volume of clothing sold in Britain now is double what it was 10 years ago. I don't remember 10 years ago people walking around naked or in ragged clothes. We don't need to make and sell nearly as much stuff as we do. I'm not particularly interested in the figure of GDP. It's actually a nonsense measure. The old feminist line on this is, when a man marries his housekeeper, GDP goes down because she does the same work, she just doesn't get paid for it anymore. A more traditional environmental one, if you cut down a forest, it's good for GDP because you sell the timber, but of course you don't count the loss of the forest. GDP is a nonsense measure, so I'm not very interested in what the GDP figure is. What I'm interested in is doing the things we need to do, just things like insulating homes, energy efficiency for homes, so everyone has a warm, comfortable, affordable to heat home, providing public transport, buses, encouragement for walking and cycling, doing the things we need to do, and stop doing the things we don't need to do, which is everything from fracking to extending Heathrow Airport, any airport, to new roads. So what we need to do is look at what do we need to do to make this nation fit for the 21st century for one planet living, and do those things, and stop doing many of the things like fast fashion that we can't keep doing.
So is de-emphasising the focus on GDP possible within either the current structure of capitalism or capitalism as a whole?
What we need to do is stop all of us paying the externalised costs. At the moment, Primark sells a £5 t-shirt. It makes a profit on that, one can only assume. We all pay enormous costs in terms of the possibly child labour associated with picking the cotton, with all of the carbon emissions of shipping that cotton to China to get spun into cloth, where there's dyes pumped out into the river and polluting the river, down to Bangladesh, where there's hideous garment factories where workers are treated very poorly, come over to Britain to be sold in a shop where people are on the minimum wage and 0 hours contracts. All of those things have costs we all bear. If we actually ensure that every product, every company that makes something has to include to pay for those externalised costs, they're internalised into the product, then those companies, the whole economic model changes. And, Amazon is a classic example. Amazon is a parasite. It's not paying its taxes. It's not paying to maintain roads and hospitals and schools that it needs to have to operate as a business. We're all paying for them. So if we rebalance this, the current dominance of big multinational companies and globalised capitalism isn't inevitable. It's a result of policy choices, and we can change those policies.
If we do need to descale industry, how do we make sure that that doesn't disproportionately affect industrialising nations, particularly in the global south, who are, if anything, more likely to be worse affected by climate change?
I mean, I talk about, and I'm always focused on Britain in terms of having strong local economies in Britain, built around small businesses, cooperatives, lots of local food growing, lots of local manufacturing. What we need are strong local economies for all around the world. If people are going to have food security, a basis of food security is having food growing, food production on your doorstep. A basis of having a strong local economy in each town is not, say, a place that relies entirely on growing cut flowers that consumes all the local water supplies, and that's then flown from Kenya to the UK. That's a profoundly unstable, dangerous kind of economic system. If you have an economic system there that's a strong local economy where you've got lots of small independent businesses all working together, and those independent businesses aren't just the businesses making things, you also have businesses for accountants, solicitors, for sign writers, for people who make shelves. You have strong local economies everywhere. I'm not talking about autarky. There'll always be some products. I do like a couple of cups of coffee a day, and we're not going to grow that in Britain. So there's some global trade, but you have much more strong local economies all around the world, and that's a much more stable, secure system. And I think that's really the crucial word for the coming age is security. And the right wing has traditionally owned that word and talked about guns and tanks and, goodness help us, nuclear weapons as some form of security. Security means being sure that you can put food on the table, keep a roof over your head, and that your kids and grandkids will be in the same situation, in a stable climate, in a decent environment.
To summarise, describe to me a utopian society that you would like to see, your version of that.
Well, utopian, of course, by definition, doesn't exist. We're not going to have a perfect society, but I would start with that word security, and a society in which every human being has a real, genuine chance to develop their full potential. I believe very much in a universal basic income. The idea that everyone should have the certainty of being able to put food on the table, keep a roof over their head because they've got an income that ensures that every week. I basically believe in human beings and their capacities, and so much of that now is squashed by our economic systems, by our social systems, by our lack of community. Let's open up to that human flourishing with the underlying security of knowing you're not going to have to worry about the basics.
Natalie Bennett, thank you very much.
Thank you.
For more debates, talks and interviews, subscribe today to the Institute of Art and Ideas at IAI TV.